Now, our next story tonight is about plastic pollution in the sea. Marine biologists here at the University of Plymouth have spent the past 20 years trying to identify the source of microplastics, the tiny particles found on land and sea. It's long been known that many come from plastic bottles and bags, cosmetics, even clothing fibres. But the team has identified another kind of microplastic pollution polluting these waters, and it has surprised them.
Millions of vehicles use our roads in Britain. Every time their wheels turn, the tyres leave something behind. Tiny particles of rubber. Now marine biologists are trying to find out just how many of them are ending up in the sea.
I'm holding a bag, about 4 kilograms of tiny bits of rubber. These are the particles generated when you drive along the road. Every time you put the brakes on, the friction will generate tyre particles. All of those particles are entering the environment, including the marine environment here.
Beneath the surface here in Plymouth, amongst the cuttlefish and lobsters, the tyre particles are so small they're impossible to see. So the scientists here have had to develop new tests to try to measure how many are ending up in the sea.
I've been sampling some sediments from underneath roadside drains in the estuary, which is where, when it rains, all the particles get washed into the waterways. We've also been looking at what would fall out from the atmosphere right next to a roadway. And we've also been looking for tar particles in surface waters and seeing if they're getting exported out to sea.
So let's see what we've got in this first sample.
Today they're scooping up mud from the Tamar estuary.
When we get this back to the lab, we can work out what the proportion of tyre particles is amongst the natural mud that we'd expect to be on the seabed.
And this is what they'll find under the microscope. Black, elongated rubber particles, finer than a grain of sand. New chemical tests give the team a much better idea of how many there really are.
We've been tracing microplastics in the environment for 30 years. We've been tracing the sources. We've looked at the microbeads in cosmetics, the fibres coming from clothing. But actually, I think that the biggest proportion could be from tyre particles. It might even be as much as 2/3 of all the microplastics entering the environment.
So what about the impact on humans?
It's a long way from getting the answers in terms of possible effects on human health, and I don't want to ring the alarm bell on that, but certainly the concern is there, and that's why we're probing into those questions a little bit more.
Since the team started this research 6 years ago, they've been looking at ways to reduce this form of plastic pollution.
We're only just learning about what the potential solutions to this emerging problem are. They're likely to lie in better driver behaviour, correct adjustment of the tyres, but probably most importantly, you can help to reduce the emissions of plastic to the environment by better design.
Professor Richard Thompson there talking to me about his research into microplastics that should be finished next year.